Hello everybody, welcome to Shane and Stuff. Today I'm going to teach you how to play a Feast for Odin. This is a gorgeous game. You can see designed by Uwe Rosenberg, one of the most liked designers of today. He's probably best known for Agricola and Caverna, but he's done a lot of other ones. The only one I actually have is Glass Road. It's a fantastic game. But you can always be assured that whatever he does, it is just a wonderful puzzle, a wonderful thinky game. And these games come in all different sizes, but as you can see, this one is pretty massive. However, while it may look completely daunting, it's actually not a very hard game to play. You just have a lot of options, there's a lot of things you can think about, but it's pretty easy to play. So I wanted to get a nice how to play video out there as I would teach it to friends at the table, partly because I want to get it to my table on game night, and I want to be able to have a video I can show friends before they come over. The hardest part of the game to learn is all of these actions because there are so many. I believe there are 61, I counted it earlier, plus these two other actions you could take in a 4-player game. But all of these goods, these are just all different sorts of goods. And you've got islands you can explore later, you've got buildings you can get later, you've got special items you might get, you can go exploring in the mountains. So all of these other bits, they are just accessed when you do different things with the action board. And so at every round you're going to play through all of these phases, and most of these are just automatic things. You take a new Viking, you get stuff from the harvest, we'll flip some of those tiles sometimes, you'll get a new card, and then you'll take all the actions, and then we'll go through the rest. So I'll go through that step by step, and then I'll finish with showing you the actions. Let's take a quick look at all the different components here. So when you first get the game, you will punch out the components from 16 sheets of components. You'll lay out all of the goods in these trays, and you'll see here that these goods basically are divided into rows, okay? So, and they increase basically in value. So you go from yellow or orange to red to green to blue. And so peas can turn into mead, you can flip them over. They actually have you separate them, but it's hard to keep them all on one side. So you have peas, mead, oil, and then a rune stone, right? So these are all the same size, so they all upgrade to each other. Then you have flax, fish, a pelt, and some cutlery, etc., etc. So you have all these different goods. Here you also have, so have sheep and cows, and then even bigger goods. So when you set up the game, it's not 100% important the configuration you set up. You probably want to have the action space somewhere near the center, but everything else people will interact with at different times, so you can set up how it fits for you. If you have a small-ish table and you're going to try to play 4 players, you may have to put the goods on a little end table or another chair or something to free up space or do other things. But this is how I configured it to both fit in the camera well and probably do something similar when I play. I've only played a solo game so far, and similar to how I had it configured. But for the camera, I had to make a few adjustments. So the actions board goes in the center, place the goods nearby. Then you have these mountain tiles where you'll create a stack, you'll shuffle the stack. They're all slightly different. They all have wood, stone, ore, and silver, but some will have less wood, more stone, some will have more ore, etc. So you shuffle those, and you're going to flip over 2 or 3 if you're playing a 4-player game, and then you're going to put the components on top that match. So these ones I've already flipped over. I've got the wood, stone, ore, and silver sitting there. So you can go, during the game, you will go exploring in the mountains to gather these resources. Then you got your wood pile, your stone and ore pile, and then we've got these islands up here. So these islands are each marked with a letter in the corner. So you go A through D, and so we have Greenland, Iceland, Faroe Islands, and Shetland. But at some point, these are going to flip over. They have things on the other side. So this one has Newfoundland on the other side. And you'll see, right now this one's worth 12 points and has 20 negative ones. But on the other side, it's worth 38 points but has 40 negative ones. So the way this works is during the game, you're going to need to amass goods that you will place in sort of a Tetris-like configurations to try to cover up all of the negative points. So this one, if you can cover them all up, would be worth 38 points at the end of the game. But this doesn't actually flip over to that side till near the end of the game. And then over here, you have 3 different types of buildings. So you've got, I think it's called the long house, regular house or something, and a shed. So these are worth different amounts of points, and of course they all have some negative spaces on them as well. So as long as you can cover up those negative spaces, they'll be worth that exact amount of points, or that amount of points minus however many negative spaces are still there. Then you've got ships you can get. You got whaling ships, and you got NARs and long ships. So these are more of the exploring, trading vessels. These are more of the warring vessels. So this is what you pillage and raid with. These are what you trade with. And then right here, we've got a whole bunch of special tiles. So they all have these little spots they go in on this here. I put this down here because there was an errata, I guess, in the printing. This was supposed to be in this section, which shows you can get these with the tongs or the other ways. So that should have been in this little outline section here. But these are all special tiles that count the same as blue tiles, which means you can put them next to other blue tiles or green tiles. Green tiles cannot be put next to themselves or other green tiles. So these all have varying shapes as well, which may help you fill in some weird spots you get when you're trying to fill in your grid here. So I'll go in more into how to get these stuff later. And you got some silver out here. So they come in multiple denominations. You got 1, 2, 4, and 10. You don't have to keep them how you get them. You can at any time turn them into smaller denominations if you're spending them, using them as singles or your boards or whatever. So this is the occupation deck. It's a weapon deck. These are your 2 dice. You have a D12 and a D8. The D12 is used for pillaging and whaling. The D10 is used for hunting and raiding. Now this is a player board I have all set up ready to start the game, and my starting weapons and starting occupation card. And then I have my Vikings all laid out where they're gonna go. So you don't start with all of the Vikings, you start with a group of 5, and then every round you pull a new one in. You get more, so you get 1 more Viking to play with every round. So let's take a closer look at the player board. So it's double-sided. The only difference is one side you have 7 spots here, and these are also laid out with those 7. The other side you have 6, so there's a shorter game and a longer game you could play. So the shorter game is just 1 round less. But the regular basic standard game is the full 7-round game. So like you saw down there, you would put all your extra Vikings, 7 Vikings here, 5 Vikings here. This shows you that in the first round you're going to have a harvest. You're going to get all of the goods that have a 1 on them, which is basically the first 3 goods. Second round you'll have a harvest of 1s and 2s, then 4th round 1 through 3, 6th round 1 through 4. So you've got 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, and 4. This shows that during round 3, 4, 5, and 6, you're going to be flipping over one of the island tiles. So round 3, you're going to flip over tile A. So round 3, you're going to take island A, and you are going to flip it. And I'll tell you more about what you do during that phase when I get to that part of the phase card. These are the spaces for your whaling ships. These are the spaces for your NARs or long ships. So you can have up to 4 of a mixture and 3 of your whaling ships. This is where you'll put your sheep. This is where you put your cattle. So this is simply called your placement area. So when you get goods and things, you'll be placing them in here to try to fill it up to give yourself more income, give yourself bonus goods, and also eventually hopefully cover up all these -1 points here, or else that's just going to all count against you at the end of the game, or every negative point will count against you at the end of the game. So if you cover most of them by the end, okay, not so bad, but if you don't cover all of them, or if you leave 20 open, that's 20 negative points. So this little diagram here also shows you the rules for placing in here. So what happens is you'll gain goods. So let's say you gained this salted meat. Okay, you can't use salted meat in your placement area because you can only use green and blue goods. You can also use silver and ore. Now this shows you that blue goods can be placed next to each other as well as greens. Greens cannot be placed next to each other, but they can be put next to blues. Ores and silver can also all be placed next to other ore or silver. So this red salted meat I cannot place on this board. So I would need to upgrade it. So I'll show you how to upgrade some stuff later. There's also just ways to get greens and blues, but you can take any good and upgrade it through the columns as I showed you earlier. So if I upgraded that salted meat to a silk, now I can place the silk on the board. Now the main rules are the placement, the color rules, but then this diagonal here, this is your income. When you get income, you're going to get the highest value that is not covered. So here's the thing though. So you can never cover one of these unless all of the spaces to the left and below it and then in the lower left are covered. So basically, to cover this, you've got to have this whole area. To cover this, you've got to have this whole area filled in, and so on. So I could throw this out here if I wanted to just start covering -1s, but I could not put it here because I can't cover that 15 or this 12 or this 9 because all of the stuff inside it and this direction have not been covered yet. So if I wanted to, I could do this. That'll work. Or this. Because the 0, there's nothing else to the left or below it or inside. So I could start with this. So let's say I got another silk. Well, I wouldn't be able to put it here because I can't put greens next to greens. But let's say I upgraded another silk, or I got this rug, or I forget what exactly it is. Now I could put that there because I can put a blue next to a green. And then let's say I got another one, I could put that here because this too, everything below it and to the left and inside is filled in. Okay, so obviously you could do more interesting Tetris-y-like things with this. And then I also want you to notice this mead. Okay, so all of these little items here, these are bonuses you can get during the bonus round if every space around it is covered. So if I had something like this. So I've got all this. Now I just need that one square covered. So I could put a silver right there. So now, when I hit the bonus phase of the round, I would get a mead. Okay, so when I hit the bonus phase, say I get this mead. So, as showing right here, during the income phase, I would get 3 silver, because it's the highest uncovered one showing, and then I would get 1 mead as a bonus. So those are the rules as you start filling it in. So remember, you cannot cover any of the income spaces without covering everything in the smaller square area down this way. And then you cannot put greens next to each other, and you cannot use reds or oranges at all. That's how you'll be filling in your player board. So after you set up all of the stuff, you give each person their player board, give them their Vikings, they put all their Vikings here like this. Then you're going to give each player some starting items as indicated in the upper left corner of the actions board. So it shows 1 bow, 1 trap, 1 spear, and 1 mead, which I don't have yet, as well as 1 starting occupation. Now there are occupation cards that are this lighter brown, looks kind of yellowish, but you'll deal 1 of them to each player, and that's their starting occupation. Now this goes into their hand, so it is not in effect until they play it. Okay, but your weapons are always shown face up, and everyone can see how many weapons you have. But any occupations you get, they go into your hand, hidden at first until you've played them. And when you first get the game, there are 3 different decks. You've got this A deck, B deck, and C deck, and these are of all the occupations. So there are a ton of occupations, and they each have a section of the light brown. So the rules say when you first start, just play with the A, and then later mix in the B and C and to get more stuff. But you'll never go through all these in a game. So there's so many, I imagine, just gives you a lot of replayability, things that can drive your game into different directions and see how things turn out. But then they also all have more brown occupations to add to the occupation deck, which you can draw from during the game. So you give each player 1 starting occupation, and then you put the rest back in the box. So that's the setup. Now you randomly select who will be the first player, and you give them the moose token. This moose is the first player marker. It's just awesome. So now that you've got your start player, you're going to begin the game. And so you're going to go through those 7 rounds, going through these 12 phases, except for during the 7th round, you end the game right after the final feast. You don't get the bonus or have to update and take your Vikings off the board. So phase 1 is simply get a new Viking. Every person will pull the Viking to the far left of their stack here into their, what they call this thing space. So maybe it's because it's kind of like a Stonehenge and nobody knows what it is, so they just called it a thing. So everyone gets a new Viking. Even in the first round, everyone gets that extra Viking. Then you have a harvest. Once again, during the harvest, you'll consult what round you're in. If you're on round 1, you get the items with 1 on them. Round 2, 4, 6, and so on in the long game. And 1, 3, and 5 are the only ones that get harvest in the short game. Okay, so you check what round you're in, and if there's a harvest, you give each player those goods. So if I were playing a game right now, I would get beans, flax, and peas. peas, flax, and beans. See, they each have that little 1 on them. Now, as I mentioned earlier, all these tokens are double-sided, so on the other side of beans is milk. So be careful not to accidentally flip them over when you're taking them and giving yourself an accidental nudge, or accidentally flipping them over the wrong way and lowering their value. So everyone gets their harvest goods and puts them in their supply. Then turn exploration boards and place silver. So once again, you see what round you're in. So in the long game, if it's round 3, you flip board A. Now whenever you flip an island, you will also then place silver. And you'll notice it shows you the placing the silver 3, 4, 5, and 6, and the flipping here. And you don't flip, don't flip, don't flip. So this is telling you everything you need to do during that phase. So in round 3, you take Shetland, flip it over, it becomes Bear Island. Now it's worth 12 points if you can cover up the 22 negative ones. It's also got some game meat, some income. You can get extra income. This gives you a runestone and an ore. I don't know if that's and or ore. I'd have to check the manual, and then you can get a fish bonus. All of these bonuses, you can just cover them up. If you don't want to worry about surrounding them, you just won't get them as a bonus. But there are some spaces like this that is part of the island, you cannot cover that up. And apparently you can't cover the 5 up, but you wouldn't want to because that's income. So after you flip the one you're supposed to flip, you then put 2 silver on every other one. So that means if somebody goes to explore that island, when it's got silver on it, they will also get the silver with it. But if you flip an island with silver on it, the silver goes away. So in round 3, we're going to flip tile A and put 2 silver on B, C, and D. But in round 4, we're going to flip B, so it will lose its 2 silver, and then the first tile will get 2 silver, and then tile C and D will each have 4 silver on them. So you do that, then you go to phase 4, draw a new weapon. So everyone just gets to draw the top card of the weapon deck. So I just got another spear. Now there is one more weapon, swords. Each of these weapons is used for specific things. The bows are used when you hunt game. The traps are used when you lay a snare. The spears are used when you're whaling. The swords are used when you're raiding or pillaging. Then after everyone draws a weapon, you just move right into the actions phase. So during the actions phase, everyone is now in turn order, starting with whoever has the moople, place their Vikings on action spaces to do things. So this is where most of the game really happens. And I'll go into the actions at the end of the video. You notice these 2 tiles I have down here. So these are only if you're playing a 4-player game. Now these are double-sided, and you'll flip them randomly to see which side comes up. So whichever side has this on it, that's what you put to the far left. So this tile, this is for the right side, this is for the left side. So you flip it because the location of this gray space tells you which row it corresponds to. And basically, what these allow you to do is imitate another player's action. And just like all of the other action spaces, once one person takes that action, nobody else can. So if this came up like this, the first row, one person can imitate someone else's action. So if someone took an action you want and this is open, and it's in that row, you can then take it. So in one game, you may have row 1 that you can imitate. In another game, it's going to be row 2. And then in another game, you may have row 3. In another game, row 4. But in a solo 2 or 3 player game, you don't even use this. So then you move on. So now you determine the start player. So whoever places their last Viking on the actions board during the actions phase becomes the new start player. Then you get income. So once again, you look at your player board and any islands that you've explored into your area and see what kind of income you get. So you take the highest uncovered income value. So you get the silver right then. Next phase is animal breeding. So that's when you would look at your sheep or your cows. If you have more than one sheep or more than one cow and none of them are pregnant, you will then just change one to be pregnant. So even if you have 5 sheep or 5 cows and they're all not pregnant, you would only make one pregnant. Now if you had a pregnant cow or sheep, they would then produce another one. So you would take a one out of the supply and you would flip that pregnant sheep back to non-pregnant. So then it would become pregnant again the next round and then produce another sheep the round after that. So that's animal breeding. Next, you go to the feast. Okay, so the feast. Now, you have to fill in every available space to the left of your Viking. So in the first round, after you've taken your new Viking, you're going to have 6 squares to fill in. Now, you already start with a mead, which could cover up 2 of them. And then you also have flax for that first harvest. And then you could put your peas like that. Or you could just use the beans and place your peas like that. So the rules governing the feast is you can only use orange, red, and silver. You can't use ore, and you can't use blue or green. Oranges cannot touch oranges, reds cannot touch reds, and you can only have one type of every good placed horizontally. So let's say you had 2 bowls of peas. You could not place them both like this with a mead and fulfill the feast, because your second pea must go vertically. So it makes you have to use different foods. I guess the Vikings, they don't like the same thing too much. So if you don't fill in every space of the feast, you will have to take a penalty token. And each of these penalty tokens is worth -3 points. So you really don't want to do that, because every point is precious in this game. Because from the start, you're working really hard just not to have 87 negative points. I think it's 87 I counted the other day, somewhere around there. But if you do fulfill the feast, you succeed, and then you just put everything back to the supply. And you move to the next phase. So now it's bonus, so if anybody has any bonuses on their grids, they'll get their bonus items. Then you update and add new mountain strips. So every round, you're going to bring in a new mountain strip. So you can take the top and flip it over. And then you're also going to clear the leftmost good on the mountain strips. So when you go exploring in the mountains using these actions here, these tell you to take different amounts of items off the mountain strips. You always start from the left and move to the right. There's these arrows here. So if you were to put 2 workers onto this space, it gets you 3 items, and you would go 1, 2, 3. You would pick one strip and go 3. So this phase of the game, you clear the leftmost item off the mountain strip. If it's now empty, you remove it, and you flip one over and fill it in. And then after that, everyone gathers their Vikings that are on the actions board, puts them in their thing space, and then we're gonna resume back to phase 1. So now we've gone over all of the stuff and all the phases of each round. Now let's explore all of the action spaces. Okay, so real quick, before I go into all the actions, I realized that I never really explained exactly what worker placement is, in case it's new to you. So a worker placement game generally means that you're going to have a game where you have some sort of representation of workers, and you're going to be placing those on specific spaces that allow you to do certain actions. And usually these games have a limit to how many people can take an action, and then it'll be blocked so other people can't take it. So in Feast for Odin, you're going to be taking your workers, which are your Vikings, and you're going to be selecting all of these from all these action spaces here. Once a person has selected an action space, it's blocked. No one else can take it, okay? So in a 2-player game, you're probably going to have a lot less problems with being blocked, but in a 3 or 4-player game, there's going to be more Vikings coming on every round, and there's going to be a higher chance of what you want to do being taken. So that's part of the strategy and part of the fun, sort of, and figuring out how to do what you want to do while not getting blocked or while possibly preventing someone else from being more efficient. So in Feast for Odin, at the beginning of the round, you take the Viking that's furthest to the left into your thing space here, and then each player goes one by one in turn order, placing Vikings. So if you wanted to take any action in this column, you'd place 1 Viking. Any action in this column is 2 Vikings. Any action in this is 3, and any action in this is 4. So let's say for the first action, red player placed here. So he would get 2 mead and 2 silver. So you just take the 2 mead and 2 silver and put them in your supply, or you can put them into your placement area if you like, but you can do that later. That's an anytime action. So now, yellow will have already taken their Viking down, and now they can go anywhere but right here. So they could go here and get a sheep. So they pay 1 silver and get a sheep. Now goes back to the red player. Now they can no longer use this space to pay a silver and get a sheep. But maybe they want to use 3 and just get a sheep here, because they might really want a sheep, but then they would also get to draw an occupation card. Then yellow can go anywhere but those 3 spaces. So let's say they go down here and they take 1 wood per player and an ore. So there's 2 players, they would get 2 wood and an ore. Now this is only one worker left for red, so they can only go in this column here. So let's say they just go here and get a fish. And now yellow's final turn, so they can either take two one worker actions that have not been taken yet, or one two worker action. So they could, go here and get 2 resources off of one of the mountain strips, and then they can go, and then it's still their turn because red is already done, and then they can go here and get peas for, or beans for silver. Now you're going to go through the rest of the phases of the round, and at the end, then everyone takes all their workers off back to their thing spaces. And then at the beginning, phase 1 is take a worker back down. Now everyone has one more worker to work with. And so that's it, you just keep going through that. But I just wanted to make it clear that when you take actions, you put your workers there and you leave them there. And now they are blocking for other people. So the interesting thing is, in a 4-player game for Feast for Odin, you do have these 2 tiles. So you kind of flip them over and you take the one with this symbol and you put it lining that up with the category names. And then you just take the other one and put it here. So the way it landed is one person can copy one person's action in column 2. One person per round can copy one person's action in column 4. So these could end up flipping differently. So you've got 1 and 3, or 1 and 4, or 2 and 3. So in a 4-player game, there are 2 columns where one person will be able to still take at least one action that someone else took. But in a 1, 2, or 3-player game, that option is not available. So I just wanted to explain that really quick in case you're new to worker placement games. And just to also clarify that in Feast for Odin, it is just once someone's taken an action, it's blocked. So that's it. Now on to the rest of the video. So the action board is divided into columns. The first column only requires 1 worker. Second requires 2 workers. Third requires 3 workers. Fourth requires 4 workers. Also, when you take an action in the third column, you'll be able to draw a new occupation card. And if you take an action in the 4th column, you get to play an occupation card. So that's one way to turn that starting occupation into an active occupation. So it costs you 4 Vikings, but you're also going to get a pretty powerful move. So the more Vikings or workers that you spend, you're essentially getting stronger actions. So these are also set up in rows that basically various categories of your actions. So you've got build houses, build ships, hunting, livestock market, weekly market, products, crafting, mountains and trade, sailing, emigration, and occupation. So let's go through all of these so you know what you can do. So building houses is fairly straightforward. You'd pay the required resource, and then you get the item. So here you'd place 1 worker, pay 2 wood, and you would get a shed. You just put it in your space, and now it's 8 points at the end of the game. Starts with only worth 6 points, but if you could fill in all these negative spaces with wood and stone, then it's going to be worth its full 8 points. So the regular house and the long house are the same, except this costs 2 workers, 1 stone. This costs 3 workers and 2 stone. Now this 4 worker space, you have to pay 2 stone and 2 wood, but you get a house and a long ship, or a long house and a gnar. So here you can build ships. 1 wood gets you a whaling ship with 1 worker. 2 workers gets you 2 workers, and 2 wood gets you a gnar. 3 workers and 2 wood gets you a long ship, and of course drawing an occupation card. So now hunting. So this is basically you just going fishing. So you just put 1 worker here, you get the fish, no problem. So now hunting, game, laying a snare, and whaling all require you to roll a die. If you're successful, you then get the items pictured. Whaling requires you to have at least 1 whaling ship. This one can utilize 3, where you can use the ore in your whaling ships towards your roll. But this is a secondary lesser whaling space. So the first person to take the whaling space of the 3 workers gets a little advantage if they have more whaling ships. This one is exactly the same, except you can only use 1 whaling ship with it. So how does this work? So hunting, game, and laying a snare, you're going to roll the d8. A success is a roll of 0. Obviously you can't roll a 0, so you have to do things to reduce it. So that includes spending your weapon cards or spending wood. So you use bows for hunting game, and you use snares for laying a snare. So let's say, I've got 1 snare, and I want to lay a snare. So I put 2 workers here, and I roll a d8. I rolled an 8. Now that's not very good, and I don't have 8 wood or 8 snares, or a combination to equal 8 to get that down to 0. But you get 3 rolls, okay? So I'm not going to keep the 8, I'm going to roll again. Now I have a 6. I still can't do that with 1 snare. That's all I got. I got no wood. So basically I need to roll a 1 in order to succeed. And I just did. How about that? So I rolled a 1, and now I can spend a snare, and that makes it 0, and I succeed. You only get 3 rolls. You can stop on any roll, or if you roll to your 3rd, you must stop there and you can't go back. So you can't re-roll and say, oh no, I want to take that last one. Like if you got a 4 and you want to tempt fate and go for something less than 4, and then say, oh no, I'll take that 4 because I rolled a 5 now. You can't do that. So since I was successful, I would get a fur, and I basically get my snare back. If I spent multiple snares, I just get 1 back. It's kind of like, oh, you set the snares, you caught something, well, you now can put the snare back out there. Okay, so that fur would just go into my area, and now later, I could place it on my board, or I can upgrade it into a necklace. So hunting game is exactly the same, except you use bows instead of snares. And whaling is almost the same, except you use spears and wood to reduce your value, but you're also rolling a d12, which means, you can end up rolling a lot higher and needing more things to reduce the cost. But your whaling ships each come with 1 oar already, and there's a space for another oar. So if you have a whaling ship here, and you've obtained an oar, and you've put it on that ship, well, now when you go whaling, you've actually already got 2 to subtract from your roll. And so you'd have to fill in the rest with spears or wood. So if I had this and 2 spears, then I could reduce my roll by 4. So I would have to roll a 4 or less in order to succeed. So I roll once, I rolled a 2. There we go. Let's just spend those 2. Oh, actually, so you've got the oar, and so that's just 0. I don't have to even spend my spears. And so I could just count that as success, and then I'll get some whale meat, some whale bones, and some oil, and everything. Now the interesting thing about all these actions is if you fail, you can actually get a consolatory prize. So it's basically the things that you can use to reduce your roll. So if you fail hunting game, you get 1 bow, 1 wood. Same with the 2 space. This is just a second space, requires 2 workers. So if somebody already takes this, then you can still use 2 workers to hunt game, or if you're the one that does both, you can hunt game twice in a round. If you fail laying a snare, you also get 1 of your workers back. If you fail whaling, you actually get 2 of your workers back. And that's it. Okay. So livestock market is pretty straightforward. For this first column, you can pay a coin to get a fish, or pay 2 coins to get some salted meat, pay a coin to get a sheep, pay 3 coins to get a cow and some milk, pay 3 workers to get a sheep straight up, or 3 workers plus a coin to get a cow, 4 workers and 3 coins to get a sheep and a cow. When we go to the weekly market, 1 worker just gets you some beans and a silver. 2 workers get you flax, fish, and a silver. 3 workers get you these items. 4 workers get you spices and a silver, and then 2 milk from a cow if you have a cow, and 1 wool from a sheep as long as you have a sheep. Then these products here, if you go here with 1 worker, you can get 1, 2, or 3 milk from 1, 2, or 3 cows. So if you have 1 cow, you'd get 1 milk, 2, 2, 3, 3. If you have more, you don't get any more than that. This space gets you straight up 2 mead, 2 silver. This gets you 1, 2, or 3 wool from 1, 2, or 3 sheep. Crafting turns things into other things. So this turns flax into silk. This turns a pelt and silk into 2 silver and a coat. This, I'll get to that in a second. This turns 1 stone into silver and a rune stone. This turns wood or ore into a silver and a chest. This turns these into these. This gets you 4 silver, turns a wool into a cloak, and the silverware into a necklace. Now, this turns the ore into something you're going to smelt. So this is the tongs, basically meaning that now, remember this? Oh. So this has all these items that has this tong symbol. So if you take that action, you basically can take any of these items with that tong symbol. So, which is pretty good. I mean, this item fills up 9 squares, okay? And there's another way to get these, I'll show you. But that space gets you these right off as long as you have an ore. you can get any of these with the tongs. So, and obviously there has to be another way to get these because those ones don't have the tong symbols. Okay, so now mountains and trade. So there's 3 spaces here that don't cost a worker. This one gets you 2 resources off of 1 mountain strip. So again, you start from the left and move in. So if somebody's already taking those 2 woods and those 2 stone, then your 2 resources would be those 2 ore. This gets you 1 resource off a strip and allows you to upgrade any 1 good. So that basically means now you can upgrade your fur to a necklace. And now it's a blue token, which can be placed next to any other token. Remember, the greens, they're a little limited. They can make it a little tough because you can't put them next to each other. They can touch corners, but they can't touch sides. So, or you could, if you wanted to, upgrade your flax to a fish, etc. So any good upgraded to its next level. Now, you can even upgrade sheep and cattle. So that's why they're in these rows here. So sheep upgrade to a wool. Cattle upgrades to clothing. So it can be fairly lucrative to gain sheep and cattle during the game and breed them and have a bunch at the end. Because even though they are each worth a certain point value at the end of the game, if you upgrade them, so if you upgraded your sheep, this is basically a 4x4 space, which essentially could turn into 8 points if you cover up 8 negative ones. So this space upgrades any 2 items. This gives you 1 wood per player and an ore. I didn't use this at all in the solo game because I was getting ore in other ways, and it's just I would only get 1 wood. This is great in a 4-player game because it only costs you 2 workers, gets you 4 wood and an ore. It's pretty sweet. So this gets you 3 off of 1 strip, upgrades 1. This upgrades 3. This gets you 3 off 1 strip, 2 off another. This upgrades 3 and gets you 4 weapon cards. Very nice. This gets you 4 upgrades. This gets you 4 off of any 1 strip and upgrades any 2 items twice. So these ones, you can't say, oh, I'm going to upgrade 1 item twice and upgrade another once to get your total of 3. No, you have to upgrade 3 different items. Now, it's kind of a may thing. So if you only have 2 to be upgraded, and this is already taken, you got to go there, and so you can upgrade only 2. Or maybe there's some reason you don't want to upgrade something. But this space allows you to do 2 items upgraded twice. So basically, you could take flax, upgrade it to a fish, and then upgrade that fish to a pelt. So then this space here gets you 2 off of 4 different strips, or 3 double upgrades. Okay, so now sailing. So all of these require certain ships. So these 3 require your Nars, and these 4 require long ships. This plundering requires 2 long ships. It gets you the massive 12 square silver hoard. So these first 2 spaces, these are overseas trading. So what these do is, as long as you have a Nar, you could pay a silver and you can upgrade any number of your green items. So this is pretty cool if you get to a point where you've upgraded a lot to green, so that you could just in one move upgrade them all to blue. However, they have to be different. So if you had 2 pelts and you use that, you can only upgrade 1 of these to blue. As long as you have all different green items, you can upgrade all of them. This allows you to pay 2 silver, and now you can buy any 2 of the items, the special items. So all of the special items except the crown has a value here. So if I place here, I can buy 2. So this one would cost me 4, and then I could buy another one for its value. See the shield, it costs 6. And there's another way to get those though. So raiding and pillaging. So just like the hunting and whaling, you use the D8 or D12. Okay. So raiding requires 1 long ship, but you can't use any of the ore you've put on them. All the long ships have 3 spaces for ore. Pillaging, you can use the ore. Raiding also uses the D8, so the total value for you is going to be limited because you can't use ore, and you can only get a maximum of 8 plus any swords or stone you want to add to increase your die. So these also, you want to roll high, while the hunting and whaling, you want to roll a 0 to succeed. By the way, it does say you can at any time just declare a failure. Maybe you just want the free goods and you don't feel like you're going to be able to succeed. Okay, so unfortunately I had just finished making the whole video and I ran into an issue that I hate when it happens. My memory card got full, but my camera does not stop recording or tell me that happened. So I gotta pick up again. This is my second time going through this. Maybe it'll be a little better, but you wouldn't know. So back to raiding. So for raiding, you need at least one longship, but you can't use any of the ore you've put on the longship. You're gonna roll your D8, and then you can spend swords or stones to raise the value. So what are you doing with that value? Well, remember these? So each of these has a sword value on it. So whatever your total is, you can get one of these items of that value or less. So you don't have to stop at 8. If you roll an 8, you can add swords or stone to make it higher. So if I rolled, I got a 4. Let's get a little higher than a 4 here. There's a 5. Should I tempt fate and roll a third time? I got a 1. That stinks. So I have no swords, I have no stones, but maybe in the game I would have more. But let's say I rolled an 8, and so then I could take this guy. This is worth 8 swords, so I can just get that. You can also, it's any blue item actually. So all the blue items also have sword values. So there's an 8, 7, 6, 10, 15. You can just get a silver hoard by raiding or pillaging. Okay. So pillaging is the same thing, except you can use one longship and you can add the ore to it, and you can use the D12. So if you rolled a 12 and you had a full nar, then that's 15. So one more, you can make it 16, and that's the only way to get the English crown. You can't buy this with silver, and it's not a tong thing and stuff, so you can get that. So I did get that in my solo game. It's also worth 2 points, so if at the end of the game you have it here, it's worth 2 points. So everything that has this symbol on it, that's the points it's worth. So that's worth points. Sheep and cattle are worth points. Any ships you still have down here are worth points. And of course, I've already showed you the corners of these guys point. So that's basically what you're trying to do in the game, is cover up all of the negatives on your player board, on an island, on the buildings you get, and then get as many other points as you possibly can. And there's another way to get quite a few points we still have yet to get to. Also, you get a failure prize for failing these. So raiding, you get a sword and a stone, and a Viking for pillaging, sword and stone, a Viking for the 3 worker pillaging. This one, you just do 4 workers, and you have to have 2 long ships, and then you just get the silver hoard. Okay. So now these are basically your exploring spaces. So if you put 1 worker here and have one of these 3 ships, or put 1 worker here and you have one of these 2 ships, or 2 workers, 3 workers here and have a long ship, then you can get Shetland or Faroe Islands. So that's only in the first 2 rounds that you'll have. I'm sorry, actually, player board. Actually, all the way up to the 4th round, you'll still have Faroe Islands before it's flipped. But anyway, so Shetland or Faroe Islands here, Iceland, Greenland, or Bear Island here, Baffin Island or Labrador or Newfoundland. So basically, if that's out, whichever one's out there, you put the workers there, you have that kind of ship, and you can just take the island, you put it in your space. Oops, just knocked some things flying. So this is worth 4 points, it says, but there's 16 negative ones. So if you don't cover them all up, it's going to be worth negative points. Now we get to the emigration and occupation. So this space, 1 worker gets you an occupation card and a silver. This space, 1 worker and paying a stone or ore allows you to play 1 occupation card and get a silver. This space, 2 workers, you can play up to 2 occupation cards, 3 workers up to 4 occupation cards. Okay. Now, emigration. What is this? Okay, so the silver cost is the round you're in. So if you're in round 6, you pay 6 silver, and then you can take either a nar or a long ship, and you flip it over, and it becomes worth that much points. The long ships are worth 21 points. And then you put it up here, covering up 2 of the feast spaces. So that's 2 less spaces that you need to fill during the feast. Okay, that's a good way to get a lot of points. and also to reduce your requirements in the feast. But you probably don't want to do that till the end game unless you're just a boat making machine, but you might want to be using those ships for other things before the end of the game. But of course, there's limited spaces, so you want to do as many as you can. So these two are the same, just 2 workers, 3 workers. 4 workers allows you to turn a whaling ship into 1 Nar, and then pay the amount of the round you're in, and then emigrate one ship. So in 1 round, really 3 ships can be emigrated and 1 converted. That is all of the action spaces, okay? So as you can see, the action space description is what took most of the explanation, and the game is fairly simple. These phases are not terribly complicated. Pull a Viking down, get the harvest, flip a island, maybe, gain a card, do all the actions. First player, income, breeding, feast, bonuses, swipe and replace mountain, strips, bring your Vikings back, and then start again. So it's not terribly complicated, but there is just so much to think about because there's so much to do. It's so open-ended, it's so fun, it's so thematic, it's so good. Okay, so the final thing is the occupation cards. So when you play an occupation card, there's 3 different kinds. So there's yellow, orange, and blue. So the yellows are it's immediate effect once, okay? So this card basically means if I had at least 2 sheep and 1 is pregnant, then I can get 1 milk and 1 wool. But if I had at least 4 sheep, when I did that, I'd get an extra wool. So I do that, play it, and then it's just discarded, okay? I think all the yellows, well, this yellow's worth 2. So how's that work? 1, 2, 3 long ships. Get 2, 5, or 10 weapon cards? Wow. So I guess you keep it in your space because they could be worth points at the end of the game. So the oranges are each time cards. So this ship owner means each time you build a ship, but not bought. So basically it's got to be these spaces. You can upgrade 1 item. So I didn't mention buying yet. That's an anytime action I'll get to in 1 second. And then the blue, these are anytime actions. So at any time you can take 2 flax and turn them into 3 oil with that card. So they're all fairly explanatory, but then the game comes with an appendix, which has a greater description of every card. So every card, bottom right corner, has a number and a letter. You just go find that. You got more information. Okay. So now, anytime actions. So I've gone through, how you fill in all your spaces and stuff, but I did not tell you when you do that. Basically, anytime, as long as it's not right in the middle of an action. So you do it right before your income phase. You can wait till then, and you can do it right before the bonus phase. So you do it just at any time you want. You could be figuring it out and then just decide to do it. Maybe you were trying to figure out how to do something and then you decide to go with something, and you can do it. But once you place them here, you cannot remove them. So you can, play with it probably. It's up to you and who you're playing with. But once you've put it there and you've moved on to something else, you got to leave it there. So that's an anytime action. Buying ships is an anytime action. So you can buy ships as well as build them. So each ship has a silver value above it on the little board there, but also it's the same as the point value. So at any time I can spend 3 silver to get a whaling ship, 5 to get a Nar, or 8 to get a long ship. You can also arm your ships at any time. So if you have ore and you have space for ore on your ships, you can arm them at any time. You can also switch out silver for different denominations at any time. So you can turn these 4 into 2 twos or 4 singles or whatever. So you can make change or consolidate at any time. So that's pretty much it. It is not that difficult to play once you know all of the actions. They're pretty straightforward. The little symbols remind you. The hardest thing is remembering exactly the raiding, pillaging, hunting, snares, and whaling. Which one's high, which one's low, 0, successes, swords, whatever. And also just putting this all together in your mind to have a plan to do what you need to do. So basically you go through all the rounds. In the final round, you end the game after the feast. Then you could place any more stuff you gotta place, and then you score. So how do you score? So you check all your point value on your ships, point value on your emigration ships, Point value on your exploration boards. That's basically the islands. See how many points you've got there. So you just put the point value of the board. You don't count up the negatives yet. Then you check your sheds and houses, sheep and cattle, the occupation cards. So all the occupation cards have point values. Any silver is worth points. Your final income. I'm not sure why they put this here because I'm pretty sure that you may use some of your final income for the final feast or something. So they tell you to write it here, but it seems like just take it, put it anywhere you might still need to put it. You might even need it to still cover up some of your negatives here. So they say to write here, it's kind of weird. I just wouldn't do that. I would just take that final income and at the end just use it as silver if you've got any extra. And if you have the English crown, you get the 2 points. So then you go check any negatives left on your home board, exploration boards, sheds and houses, and the thing penalty if you got any. The penalties if you did complete the feast. And then you give yourself your total. That's your total points. Obviously in a multiplayer game, most points wins. A solo game, you're essentially just trying to get the highest score you can and you play it multiple times, see how you do. The manual says that a good score, a great score is 100. And I scored 33 my first game, so I wasn't too sad about that because when you see all of these negative ones, you have no idea how you're gonna do that at the end. And I was just happy I didn't end up with a negative score at the end. Okay, so basically that's it, and let me show you really quick how to play the solo game because it's not that different from the multiplayer game, but you just do it yourself, and you just have 2 different colors you're going to be using, so you can just basically it creates blocking for yourself. But other than that, you basically play it the same way. So let me show you that. Okay, so to play solo, you're going to need 2 different colored Vikings, and basically you set it up like you're doing a normal game, except you take out the round 2, 4, and 6 Vikings with the first color, and now you're going to put just like normal. You're going to have 1 Viking round 1, but then the second color you're going to put 2 here. Then you're going to have 2 reds, 2 of your other color, 2 of your first color, etc., all the way down. Then you're going to take 6 of your second color, put it in this waiting space over here. Okay, so round. And then you're going to remove 1 of that second color. You won't need it. So in the first round, you take that 1 extra, you play your actions, and then in the second round, you pull your 2 down, you bring your waiting ones here, and you go again. But now your previous color is blocking you, so you can't play on these spaces you've already played on. So you play out this round. And then you bring the red back, and you bring 2 down, etc. So you're just going to go through the whole game like that. So you're basically blocking yourself, simulating playing against somebody at least, where you just don't have everything available to you every round. But it also means as a solo player, you won't be able to take the same action 2 rounds in a row. When in a multiplayer game, that could happen. You might be doing something different than everyone else, and each round you get to redo it. Or you may even fight for that first player spot, extending out your round by using smaller action spaces so you go last. So you end up going first, and then you can get that thing you really wanted that maybe somebody else was going to do, or maybe they're doing it every round, and you've got to do what you got to do to get what you need. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it. I hope this helps you. I hope it helps me get some people joining in on this game with me. It'll definitely make it easier. I don't have to go through the whole spiel the night of. I could just point them to the video and then answer any questions, do a refresher and whatever. So basically, the phases of the game are not complicated at all. So, phase 1, pull your Vikings down. Phase 2, if there's a harvest, you get stuff. Phase 3, if it's a round that you flip and put silver. Phase 4, you get a card. Phase 5, then you do all your actions. That's where the rubber meets the road. Once you've played a game, you remember all of these. They're all very straightforward. The only thing is the hunting, whaling, pillaging, and raiding, remembering, whether you're rolling high or low and how those affect things. And also just discerning between all of the options you have and how you're going to go forward. But it's pretty easy to play, but so much possibility. It's just so good. It's just so beautiful. It's just so thematic. I'm really enjoying it. I haven't been this excited about a game in a little while, I don't think. I've gotten some really good games lately. I do really like them, but oh my gosh, this has me at the top level of excitement. So again, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it helps. Give the video a like, subscribe to my channel. I'll put out more stuff. Let me know what you want. Let me know what you liked. And until next time, game on. End of line.